Now, although the religious leaders of this country and other concerned parties point out the need to protect important strategic assets of the country, it does not seem like the leaders of this country are heeding their advice. Now, foreign powers have been eyeing on these key strategic locations in the country for some time now. There are many countries waiting to spread their influence at key locations in places like Trincomalee, Galle, Hambantota, Colombo, or even the Colombo port, the location that you see behind me. Now, it is because of this very reason that we reported on the eastern terminal of the Colombo port facing a threat of falling into the hands of foreign countries. Yesterday, we highlighted the fact that the Sri Lanka Ports Authority had issued a media release confirming the existence of such an agreement and how the shares of this terminal will be divided. Now, it is only today that the cabinet paper on this matter was presented. And when it was presented, according to sources, the president had directed for the cabinet paper to be presented again in 2 weeks after this specific agreement is finalized and presented to the cabinet. But despite all of this, the Ministry of Ports and Shipping, issuing a media release today, stated that a memorandum of cooperation was signed between Sri Lanka, India and Japan. Now, although the cabinet paper was postponed for 2 weeks, the ministry signs a memorandum of cooperation with India and Japan. Now, the release goes on to note the manner in which shares and other powers relating to the terminal will be discussed and finalized in the future. But now the question that lingers on in everyone's minds is, why the massive hurry? What is the real reason behind the rush? Instead of preparing the agreements, presenting it to cabinet and to the people, and then going ahead with the signing, why was the entire process rushed? Now, in 2013, when the CICT terminal of the Colombo port was being constructed, again under Chinese funds by the Chinese, the trade unions that objected to this were given a written promise by the Ports Authority that the development of the eastern terminal of the Colombo port will not be given to any foreign country. They were promised that any development activities on the eastern terminal of the Colombo port will be a 100% Sri Lankan project. Now, with this move to sign a memorandum of cooperation with India and Japan, have they violated this agreement? Also, for the development of the Colombo port, a loan was obtained from the Asian Development Bank. Now, the agreement with the ADB for this loan clearly states that the Ports Authority agree that if the two terminals are being developed, quote, the project shall be chosen through an open, competitive bidding process. Has any tenders been called from India and Japan, or have they been simply called up and phoned up and offered the deal? With the current turn of events, this is a serious question that begs to be answered. Also remember that there is a statement made by President Maithripala himself regarding handing over of these very specific assets to foreign countries. The president made this statement at the premises of the port itself, which adds even more significance to this statement.
I assure you that not even a small portion of land will be given to any foreign nation or organization. That is my policy. I will not give away the eastern terminal of this beautiful port that we are in now to anyone.
Now, adding to this, the president also at one instance said that India and Japan will not be given the eastern terminal for development, but they could be given the construction of a proposed western terminal. But however, these countries continuously insist that they be given the eastern terminal, which is 400 meters in length and is still to be completely developed. This terminal was already constructed when the government of good governance came into power back in 2015. Cranes could have been fixed and the terminal made operational during the past 4 years that this government of good governance was in power. However, these measures were stalled as the first tender process was annulled as it was found to be corrupt, and no tenders were called for the development of this terminal thereafter. For a moment now, think as to how much of loans have been granted from state banks to undesirable or unpopular ventures and companies. Now, I am speaking specifically about the massive loans in the billions that were granted to companies like MTD Walkers and companies like Perpetual Treasuries, who were simply allowed to loot the central bank of Sri Lanka out of all banks in the country, also through the intervention of state banks. Now, against such a backdrop, if the Ports Authority really didn't have the funds to complete this terminal, could they not have been given the required funds from a state bank? Why can't Sri Lanka be the sole owner of this eastern terminal? According to sources, the eastern terminal is the only possible terminal for the largest ships in the world, which are the post-Panamax ships, to dock at once the terminal, of course, is fully developed. Now, if that is the case, we are clearly trying to give away a truly valuable asset. Speaking further on the matter was Minister Daya Gamage. When he was questioned on the same matter today, this was his response.
President Maithripala Sirisena in 2017, 2 years back, very vehemently opposed the fact that India taking part in the construction of the eastern terminal. Wasn't it decided back then that 51% will be owned by us? Was that the reason that he denied?
You just imagine the country situation today. Do you know 83% of our that tourism has gone, more than 300 flights cancelled. We expected this year turnover from tourism only 5.5 billion. So do you want to bankrupt our country, or that do you want to go forward? We have to think differently. Without that, without thinking, we have to think differently.
Minister Daya Gamage says that our country performance has collapsed in every way. He says that the tourism industry and the economy of our country has plummeted. In order to save the country from such disaster, the best step is for the leaders of this country to accept their inabilities and inefficiencies. They were in power for approximately 4 years, and if they fail to stabilize the country from all aspects, if they fail to stabilize the country in terms of national security and economic stability and create chaos among the general public, this government or the respective cabinet ministers accepts the responsibility in this regard, the government must resign.
Now, while politicians are all for violation of due process and other procedure, rules and regulations, at the end of the day, it's a completely different person who suffers the consequences. Even yesterday, we highlighted the countless number of times that state officials had to pay the price for the sins of politicians. The best example is Lalit Viratunga, and even today, it was reported in court that certain state officials who acted under the direction of Minister Lakshman Kiriella, serving under his ministry, suffering for the sins of politicians.
3 suspects were arrested for attempting to post 600 letters containing defamatory remarks against the president and in a manner that jeopardizes public security were handed over to the Colombo Crimes Division today. The suspects were produced for inspection today before Colombo Fort Magistrate Ranga Disanayake. The suspects were previously placed under the custody of the Colombo Crimes Division for 90 days under detention orders. The Colombo Crimes Division informed court that investigations are underway into the incident under emergency regulations and the Prevention of Terrorism Act. The Defence Counsel requested for the suspects to be placed in remand custody. However, the magistrate declined this request. The 3 suspects were arrested along with documents containing defamatory remarks against the state at the Central Mail Exchange on the 2nd of last month. It was revealed that the suspects had attempted to propagate false information regarding the April 21st attacks and those responsible for it. It was also revealed that the suspects were employees of the media division of the State Ministry of Enterprise Development.
The current chairman of the Sri Lanka Ports Authority, Kavan Ratnayake, to date has a clean record. Therefore, it would be wise for him to conduct himself in accordance with the accepted rules and regulations and procedures if he does not want to suffer the same fate as the employees of Minister Lakshman Kiriella under his ministry. Now, the statement made by Daya Gamage makes it all clear that the country is sinking and you, the government, have failed the country. So as the people of this country have time and time again said, if you can't do it, please leave and hand it over to someone who could. The country cannot be developed by selling off bits and pieces of our assets to foreign countries.